I'm Kate Collins, 32, a documentary filmmaker. The funeral director's cologne mixed with the scent of wilted lilies, creating a nauseating sweetness that clung to the back of my throat. I pressed my fingernails into my palms, focusing on the sharp bite of pain rather than the two mahogany caskets gleaming under the chapel's fluorescent lights. Mom and Dad, gone in an instant when that semi ran the red light. Uncle Richard's hand landed on my shoulder with the weight of ownership. Kate. His voice carried that familiar authority that had always made my skin crawl, even as a child. We need to talk. The last mourner had shuffled out 20 minutes ago, leaving just the three of us, Richard, my younger brother Danny, and me, standing in the suffocating quiet of Riverside Memorial Chapel. Danny, barely 18 and still wearing his high school graduation ring, stared at the floor like he could disappear into the burgundy carpet. "You belong to me now," Richard said, his fingers tightening on my shoulder. "Not your family now, or we'll get through this together. You belong to me. Like property. Like things to be claimed." I stayed silent. The words hung in the air between us, heavy as the floral arrangements that would be thrown away tomorrow. Richard's breath smelled of mint and something darker, whiskey, maybe, or the metallic tang of secrets kept too long. His grip shifted, thumb pressing against the hollow of my collarbone where my mother's necklace used to rest before the accident took even that small comfort from me. "The house is already in my name," he continued, his voice dropping to that intimate register I remembered from childhood visits, when he'd corner me in hallways and speak in whispers that made my stomach turn. "Your parents' debts, the funeral costs, I've handled everything. You should be grateful." Danny finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and lost. At 18, he still believed adults had his best interests at heart. Still trusted that family meant safety. I wanted to scream, wanted to grab my brother and run. Instead, I nodded once, sharp and quick, because I'd learned long ago that resistance only made Richard more determined to prove his control. "Good girl," he murmured, and the praise felt like acid on my skin. "Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming." The drive to Richard's house, our house now, he kept reminding us, passed in a blur of suburban streets and Danny's quiet sniffling from the passenger seat. I gripped the steering wheel of my parents' Honda, following Richard's black Mercedes through neighborhoods that grew progressively more isolated, more expensive, more removed from any potential witnesses. Richard lived in a sprawling colonial at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, surrounded by old-growth trees that blocked most of the neighboring houses from view. I'd been here exactly 3 times in my 32 years, twice for awkward Christmas dinners when I was young, and once for my aunt's funeral 5 years ago. Each visit had left me with the same crawling sensation, like insects moving beneath my skin. "Home sweet home," Richard announced as we pulled into a circular driveway. The house loomed against the darkening sky, all sharp angles and shadowed windows. "Kate, you'll take the guest room upstairs. Danny, there's a nice setup in the basement. Privacy for a growing boy." The basement, of course. Isolated, soundproof, accessible only through the kitchen where Richard spent most of his time when he wasn't at his law firm downtown. I caught Danny's eye in the rearview mirror and saw my own dread reflected there. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I think Danny should take the upstairs room. He's still in school, needs quiet for studying." Richard's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "I think I know what's best for my household, Kate. Danny will be perfectly comfortable downstairs." My household. Not our family or our home. His household. His property. His rules. We unloaded our hastily packed suitcases in silence. Everything we own now fit into 4 pieces of luggage and a cardboard box of photo albums I'd grabbed from our childhood bedroom. 24 years of family life reduced to what could fit in a trunk. The guest room Richard assigned me was on the 2nd floor, directly across from his master suite. The walls were thin. I could hear his television, his footsteps, the creak of his bed frame when he shifted in his sleep. The door had no lock. That first night, I lay awake listening to the house settle around us, cataloging every sound. Richard's shower running at 11:47 p.m. His footsteps in the hallway at 12:23 a.m., pausing outside my door for exactly 37 seconds before moving on. The basement door opening and closing at 12:45 a.m. I pressed my ear to the floor, straining to hear any sound from Danny below. Nothing. Just the hum of the furnace and my own thundering heartbeat. At 3:17 a.m., I heard Richard's door open again. This time, his footsteps were deliberate, purposeful. They stopped outside my room, and I held my breath as the doorknob turned slowly, testing. I'd wedged a chair under the handle, an old trick from my college dorm days when my roommate's boyfriend got too friendly after parties. The knob rattled once, twice, then stopped. "Kate." Richard's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Are you awake, sweetheart?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. My throat had closed completely, every muscle in my body locked in terror. "I know you're scared," he continued, his voice carrying easily through the thin door. "It's natural. You've lost so much. But I'm here now. I'll take care of you. Both of you. The way families should." The way families should. As if there was something noble about what he was planning. As if his intentions were anything other than predatory. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said finally. "About expectations. About gratitude. About what it means to be part of this family now." His footsteps retreated, but I didn't move the chair. Didn't close my eyes. Didn't breathe normally until I heard his bedroom door click shut and the house fell silent again. 20 years. I would spend the next 20 years planning, waiting, documenting. Building a case not just against Richard's crimes, but against the entire system that had failed to protect us. The lawyers who looked the other way. The teachers who ignored the signs. The neighbors who heard things but chose silence. But that night, curled in a stranger's bed in a house that smelled of old secrets and fresh threats, I was just a terrified 32-year-old woman who'd lost everything and gained a monster for a guardian. The last thing I heard before exhaustion finally claimed me was the sound of the basement door opening again, followed by Danny's muffled voice, saying something I couldn't quite make out. Then Richard's low chuckle, warm and satisfied, drifting up through the heating vents like smoke. The smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee pulled me from a restless sleep at 6:30 a.m. Sunlight filtered through unfamiliar curtains, and for one blissful moment, I forgot where I was. Then Richard's voice drifted up from the kitchen, that practice charm he used with clients and neighbors, and reality crashed back like ice water. "Danny, son, you need to eat more than that. Growing boy like you." I dressed quickly in yesterday's funeral clothes, the black dress wrinkled from sleeping in it. The chair was still wedged under my doorknob where I'd left it, a small victory that felt hollow in the morning light. Downstairs, I found Danny picking at a plate of eggs while Richard bustled around the kitchen like a doting father. "Kate." Perfect timing. Richard's smile was warm, genuine-looking. If I didn't know better, I might have believed it. "I've made your favorite blueberry pancakes." I hadn't eaten blueberry pancakes since I was 12. The fact that he remembered this detail from 2 decades ago made my skin crawl. How many other details had he cataloged and stored away? "Just coffee, thanks." I poured myself a cup from the pot, noting how Richard's eyes tracked my every movement. Danny looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes like bruises. "Nonsense. You're too thin." Richard slid a plate in front of me anyway, the pancakes perfectly golden, arranged with the kind of care that suggested hours of practice. "I insist." The word insist carried weight in his voice. Not a suggestion. A command wrapped in false kindness. I took a bite. The pancakes were perfect, fluffy, sweet, exactly how I'd liked them as a child. The taste triggered a memory I'd buried. Being 7 years old at a family barbecue, Richard teaching me to flip pancakes while my parents chatted with other relatives. His hands guiding mine on the spatula. His breath on my neck. The way he'd whispered, "Our little secret," when he'd let me lick the batter from his finger. I'd forgotten that day. Or maybe I'd forced myself to forget. "Good?" Richard asked, watching me chew with an intensity that made my stomach turn. "Delicious," I managed. Danny pushed his eggs around his plate, not eating. His usual teenage appetite had vanished overnight, replaced by the hollow look of someone who'd seen too much too soon. "So," Richard said, settling into his chair with his own coffee, "we need to discuss some ground rules. House rules. For everyone's comfort and safety. Here it comes, I thought. The terms of our imprisonment. First, curfew. Danny, you're in school, so weeknights you're home by 8. Weekends, 10 p.m. Kate, I know you're used to your independence, but given the circumstances, the grief, the adjustment, I think it's best if you're home by 9 on weeknights. We're family now." Family eats dinner together. I bit back my first response. We're not family. You're a predator who's been waiting 20 years for this opportunity. Second, communication. If you're going somewhere, you let me know. Where, when, who you're with. It's not about control. It's about caring. About knowing my family is safe. Danny's fork clattered against his plate. What about school? My friends? I can't just disappear. Of course not, son. You'll finish high school. But your priorities need to shift. Family first. Always family first. The way he said son made my teeth ache. Possessive. Claiming. Third, Richard continued, his voice dropping to that intimate register I remembered from last night. Privacy. What happens in this house stays in this house. We don't air our family business to outsiders. We don't invite people over without permission. We protect each other. We protect each other. The irony was suffocating. And finally, he said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his, gratitude. I've taken on a significant financial burden here. The funeral costs, the house payments your parents couldn't make, Danny's school expenses. I'm not asking for payment. Family doesn't work that way. But I am asking for appreciation. For recognition of what I'm doing for you both. His thumb stroked across my knuckles, and I fought every instinct to jerk away. His touch was warm, gentle, completely at odds with the threat underlying his words. We understand, I said quietly. We're grateful. I know you are, sweetheart. I know. The endearment hung in the air like smoke. Danny stared at our joined hands with something approaching horror, finally understanding what I'd known instinctively since childhood, that Richard's kindness came with a price we couldn't afford to pay. After breakfast, Richard left for his law firm downtown, but not before kissing my forehead with paternal affection that made my skin burn. I'll be home by 6 for dinner. Kate, there's a grocery list on the counter. Danny, straight home after school. The moment his Mercedes disappeared down the driveway, Danny exploded. What the hell was that? The hand-holding, the rules, He gestured wildly, searching for words. He's treating us like prisoners. Keep your voice down, I hissed, glancing toward the windows. We don't know who might be listening. Listening? Kate, you're being paranoid. He's weird, yeah, but he's family. He's trying to help. The innocence in Danny's voice broke my heart. At 18, he still believed in the fundamental goodness of adults. Still trusted that family meant safety. Danny, listen to me carefully. Richard isn't helping us. I stopped, searching for words that wouldn't shatter what remained of my brother's childhood. He's not safe. We need to be very, very careful. What are you talking about? He gave us a home. He paid for the funeral. He's been planning this. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. The way he knew about the pancakes. The way he had our rooms ready. The way he talked about ownership. This isn't kindness, Danny. This is something else. Danny stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You think he what? Killed Mom and Dad? Caused the accident? No. But I think he's been waiting for something like this. An opportunity. An opportunity for what? I couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the suspicion that had been growing since childhood, fed by uncomfortable touches and whispered endearments and the way Richard's eyes lingered too long on places they shouldn't. Instead, I said, just trust me. We need to be careful. We need to have a plan. A plan for what? For getting out of here. Danny laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what money? What resources? Kate, we have nothing. Less than nothing. We're in debt up to our eyeballs, and Richard is the only thing standing between us and complete financial ruin. He was right, and we both knew it. Richard had made sure of that. The timing of his generosity, the speed with which he'd assumed control of our parents' affairs, it all felt too convenient, too well orchestrated. There has to be another way, I said. Like what? We're adults, Kate. Technically, the system isn't going to save us. And even if it would, save us from what? From a relative who's giving us free room and board while we get back on our feet. The rational part of my brain knew Danny was right. On paper, Richard was the perfect guardian. Successful lawyer, stable income, family connection. No court would remove us from his care based on my vague suspicions and childhood memories. But the part of me that remembered being 7 years old and learning to keep secrets knew better. Just promise me something, I said finally. Promise me you'll be careful. Don't be alone with him, if you can help it. Don't let him. I struggled for words that wouldn't sound insane. Don't let him get too close. Danny's expression softened. Kate, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But maybe we're overthinking this. Maybe grief is making us paranoid. Maybe. But as I spent the day grocery shopping with Richard's credit card, buying ingredients for the family dinners he'd mandated, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd walked willingly into a trap that had been 20 years in the making. That evening, Richard returned home with flowers, white roses for the dining room table and a single red rose for me. For the lady of the house, he said, presenting it with a flourish that made Danny roll his eyes. But I saw the way Richard's fingers lingered when I took the stem. Saw the satisfaction in his eyes when I thanked him politely. Saw the way he watched me move around his kitchen, preparing dinner in the apron he'd bought specifically for me, as if he'd been planning this domestic fantasy for years. During dinner, he regaled us with stories from his law practice, charming anecdotes about difficult clients and courtroom victories. He was funny, engaging, the perfect dinner companion. If I didn't know better, I might have enjoyed his company. But I did know better. And when he suggested we watch a movie together afterward, family bonding time, I saw Danny's resistance crumble under the weight of Richard's practiced charm. We settled into the living room, Danny in the recliner, me on one end of the couch, Richard on the other. He'd chosen the movie, some romantic comedy from the 90s that I'd mentioned liking in college. Another detail he'd remembered and filed away. Halfway through the film, Richard shifted closer, his arms sliding along the back of the couch behind my shoulders. Not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel his body heat, smell his cologne. Comfortable, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingers found my shoulder, massaging gently. You're so tense, sweetheart. You need to relax. You're safe now. Safe. The word was a mockery. But Danny was right there, 10 feet away, and Richard's touch was gentle, almost therapeutic. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe grief was making me see threats where none existed. Then Richard's hand moved lower, fingers tracing the line of my collarbone, and I knew with absolute certainty that my childhood instincts had been right. I stood abruptly, mumbling something about being tired, and fled upstairs. Behind me, I heard Richard's low chuckle and Danny asking if I was okay. She's fine, Richard said. Just adjusting. It takes time. In my room, I wedged the chair under the door again and sat on the bed, shaking. 20 years. I'd spent 20 years building a life away from this house, this man, these feelings of helplessness and violation. And now I was back where I'd started, except this time I had Danny to protect. At 11:43 p.m., I heard Richard's footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside my door, and the doorknob turned slowly, testing the chair's resistance. Kate. His voice was soft, coaxing. I know you're awake. We should talk. I held my breath, counting heartbeats. I understand you're confused, overwhelmed, but you don't need to be afraid of me. I would never hurt you. You know that, don't you? The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost believed it. I've waited so long for this, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. For us to be a real family. For you to come home where you belong. Waited so long. The words confirmed what I'd suspected, that our parents' death hadn't been an opportunity for Richard. It had been a goal. Sweet dreams, Kate. Tomorrow, we'll start fresh. Just the three of us. Forever. His footsteps retreated, but I didn't move the chair. Didn't close my eyes. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began typing notes, dates, times, exact quotes. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to protect Danny, I needed evidence. I needed a plan. And I needed to remember that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look like family. The basement door opened at 12:47 a.m., followed by the sound of Danny's voice, muffled but clearly distressed. Then silence. Then Richard's satisfied chuckle, drifting up through the heating vents like a promise of horrors to come. The documentary camera felt foreign in my hands after 3 months of forced domesticity. I'd hidden it in my closet behind winter coats Richard had bought me, another gesture of false generosity that came with invisible strings attached. But today, while he was at a client meeting and Danny was at school, I finally had the house to myself. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, memorizing Richard's schedule, noting the patterns of his surveillance. Because that's what it was, surveillance disguised as care. The way he checked my browser history. The way he counted the miles on my car's odometer. The way he always seemed to know exactly where I'd been and who I'd spoken to. The basement door stood open, an invitation I'd been avoiding for months. Danny spent his evenings down there now, supposedly doing homework in what Richard called his private space. But I'd heard things through the heating vents, conversations that made my stomach turn, sounds that had no place in any home where children lived. I descended the carpeted stairs, camera rolling, documenting everything. The basement was finished, comfortable even, leather furniture, a large screen TV, a mini fridge stocked with Danny's favorite sodas. It looked like a teenager's dream hangout. Until you noticed the details. The deadbolt on the inside of the door, installed backward, so it could only be locked from upstairs. The soundproofing foam hidden behind decorative panels. The camera mounted in the corner, its red recording light blinking steadily. And the photographs. They covered an entire wall, arranged with obsessive precision. Pictures of Danny from the past 3 months, sleeping, showering, changing clothes. Pictures taken through windows, through doorways, through the gap under his bedroom door. Hundreds of them, cataloged and dated like evidence in a case file. But it was the older photographs that made my blood freeze. Pictures of me. From childhood, from college, from my adult life before the accident. Richard had been watching, documenting, collecting for decades. There I was at 7, playing in our backyard. At 16, walking to school. At 25, leaving my apartment in Chicago. At 30, accepting an award for my documentary work. He'd been stalking me for 25 years. Impressive collection, isn't it? I spun around, heart hammering. Richard stood at the bottom of the stairs, his suit jacket draped over his arm, his expression calm and satisfied. I was wondering when you'd finally work up the courage to come down here, he said, moving closer. I've been waiting. The camera was still rolling in my hands, capturing everything. Richard noticed and smiled. Still making your little movies, I see. That's good. I've always admired your artistic vision. You're sick, I whispered. I'm devoted, he corrected. Do you have any idea how long I've loved you? How many years I've spent planning for this moment? He gestured to the photographs, his voice taking on the tone of a proud curator. I've documented every stage of your life. Every triumph, every heartbreak, every moment of beauty. I know you better than you know yourself. Where's Danny? Safe. At school, where he belongs. Though he won't be going back after today. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made my knees weak. What do you mean? I mean it's time for the next phase. Danny's 18 now. Legally an adult. Old enough to make his own choices about his future. And he's chosen to stay here with me. Haven't you, son? I turned to see Danny standing at the top of the stairs, his face pale and hollow. He looked like he'd aged years in the past few months, the boyish softness replaced by something harder, more broken. Danny. My voice cracked on his name. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Kate. I tried to fight it, but he has things. Pictures. Videos. If I don't do what he wants, he'll destroy my life. Our lives. What kind of pictures? Richard's smile widened. The kind that would be very difficult to explain to college admissions boards. Or future employers. Or law enforcement, for that matter. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Richard hadn't just been watching, he'd been orchestrating. Creating compromising situations, documenting them. Building leverage. You set him up, I breathed. I protected him, Richard corrected. From the harsh realities of the world. From the pain of losing his parents. From the uncertainty of his future. I gave him purpose. Direction. Love. The word love was obscene in his mouth. And now, he continued, it's your turn. He pulled out his phone, swiping through what looked like a video file. 20 years ago, you were too young to appreciate what I was offering. Too naive to understand the depth of my feelings. But you're a woman now. Mature enough to make adult decisions. The video started playing, and I saw myself on the screen, but not as I remembered. The footage had been edited, manipulated, made to look like I was participating willingly in scenarios that had never happened. My face grafted onto other bodies, my voice dubbed over conversations I'd never had. Deepfake technology is remarkable these days, Richard said conversationally. Very convincing. Very difficult to disprove, especially when combined with authentic footage from your time here. He swiped to another video, this one reel. Me in the shower, taken through a hidden camera. Me changing clothes in my bedroom. Me sleeping, vulnerable and unaware. The choice is simple, Kate. You can fight this, and I'll release everything. Your career will be over. Your reputation destroyed. Danny's future ruined. Or you can accept what's always been inevitable and let me take care of you both. The camera was still rolling in my hands, capturing his confession, his threats, his casual admission of decades of stalking and manipulation. But even as I recorded, I knew it wouldn't be enough. Richard was a lawyer. He understood evidence, understood how to discredit witnesses, understood how to make victims look like willing participants. You have until tonight to decide, he said. Dinner is at 6. We'll discuss the new arrangements then. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Kate? I'd be very careful about who you might think to contact for help. I have friends in law enforcement, friends in the media, friends who understand that sometimes family matters need to be handled privately. After he left, Danny and I stood in the basement surrounded by the evidence of Richard's obsession, neither of us speaking. The weight of our situation pressed down like a physical thing. The photographs, the videos, the years of careful planning that had led to this moment. How long? I asked finally. Since the first week, Danny said, his voice barely audible. He said it was normal. That all families had secrets. That if I loved you, I'd do whatever it took to protect you. Danny, none of this is your fault. Isn't it? He laughed bitterly. I could have said no. Could have fought harder. Could have found a way to warn you. He's a predator. This is what they do. They isolate, they manipulate, they make you feel complicit. So, what do we do now? I looked at the camera in my hands, still recording, still documenting. For 20 years, I'd built a career exposing corruption, revealing hidden truths, giving voice to the voiceless. I'd won awards for my ability to uncover stories that others wanted to keep buried. But this story, our story, felt impossible to tell. Who would believe us? Who would care about two adults who'd willingly moved into their uncle's house? Who would see past Richard's carefully constructed facade to the monster underneath? We survive, I said finally. We document everything. We wait for our moment. What moment? The moment when he gets careless. When his need for control outweighs his caution. When he makes a mistake we can use. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. That evening, Richard prepared dinner with the same meticulous care he brought to everything else. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, a perfect family meal served on his grandmother's china. He'd even opened a bottle of wine, as if we were celebrating something. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. Danny and I sat in silence, neither of us touching our food. You're not eating, Richard observed. I hope you're not planning to be difficult about this. It would be such a shame to have to use those videos. "What do you want from us?" I asked. "I want what I've always wanted. A family. Love. Devotion. Gratitude for everything I've provided. And if we give you that, then we'll be very happy together. The three of us. Forever." The word forever hung in the air like a death sentence. "I've already made the arrangements," Richard continued. "Danny will be homeschooled from now on. I've hired a very discreet tutor. Kate, you'll be taking a sabbatical from your documentary work. Indefinitely. You can't just make us disappear. Can't I? You're both adults who've chosen to live quietly with a family member. Who's going to question that? Who's even going to notice?" He was right, and we all knew it. We'd been isolated so gradually, so systematically, that our disappearance would barely register. A few concerned emails that would go unanswered. A few phone calls that would be explained away by Richard's practice charm. "Besides," he added, cutting into his chicken with surgical precision, "it's not like you're disappearing. You're just coming home, where you've always belonged." After dinner, Richard suggested we watch another movie together. Family time, he called it, as if the word family could somehow sanitize what he was planning. But this time, when he reached for me on the couch, I didn't pull away. I let his arms settle around my shoulders, let his fingers trace patterns on my skin, let him believe he was winning. Because I was still recording. The camera was hidden now, tucked into my purse with the lens barely visible, but it was still running. Still documenting. Still building the case that would eventually destroy him. "That's better," Richard murmured against my ear. "You're learning to accept what's always been true." "What's that?" "That you belong to me. That you always have." His hand moved lower, and I forced myself not to flinch, not to fight, not to give him any reason to escalate before I was ready. "I've been so patient," he whispered. "So careful. But patience has its limits." "I know. Do you? Do you really understand what I'm offering you? Security. Protection. Love beyond anything you've ever experienced." "Yes." "Good girl." The praise made my skin crawl, but I smiled anyway. Played the part he needed me to play. Let him believe he'd broken me. But inside I was counting, cataloging, planning. Because Richard had made one crucial mistake in all his years of careful preparation. He'd underestimated me. He saw me as the frightened 7-year-old who'd learned to keep secrets. The vulnerable 32-year-old who'd lost everything and needed his protection. He didn't see the documentary filmmaker who'd spent years learning how to expose predators exactly like him. He didn't see the woman who'd been planning her own revenge for 20 years. And he definitely didn't see the hidden cameras I'd been installing throughout his house for the past month. Cameras that had captured everything. Every threat, every manipulation, every moment of his carefully constructed facade slipping away. At midnight, when Richard finally retreated to his bedroom, I pulled out my laptop and began uploading files. Not to the police. Richard was right about his connections there. Not to the media, he had friends there too. But to the internet. To social media platforms and documentary streaming services and victim advocacy websites. To places where his influence couldn't reach and his money couldn't buy silence. The upload would take hours, but by morning, Richard's carefully guarded secrets would be public. His reputation would be destroyed. His career would be over. And Danny and I would finally be free. I titled the documentary simply, "After our parents' funeral, our uncle said, 'You belong to me now.'" I stayed silent. 20 years later, he stood before the world, his secrets finally exposed. The upload bar crept toward completion as I sat in the darkness, listening to Richard's satisfied breathing through the thin walls. He thought he'd won. He had no idea the game was just beginning. At 6 a.m., my phone started buzzing with notifications. The documentary had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, thousands of shares, news outlets picking up the story. By 7 a.m., there were reporters on Richard's front lawn. By 8 a.m., there were police cars in his driveway. By 9 a.m., Richard Collins, respected lawyer, pillar of the community, predator, was being led away in handcuffs while the world watched his carefully constructed life crumble in real time. Danny and I stood on the front porch, holding each other as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. We were free. Finally, impossibly, completely free. "How does it feel?" a reporter called out. "To finally have justice?" I looked at the house where we'd been prisoners, at the man who'd stolen so much from us, at the brother I'd fought so hard to protect. "It feels like coming home," I said. And for the first time in 20 years, it was true.